Hello, and welcome to EBT Goes EMV, What's Happening and How to Get Ready. Go to the next slide. I'm Casey Brandt, a standards coordinator for Conexxus, and your moderator for today is going to be Todd Hornick, Director of Payments Technology for Phillips 66. So a little bit for agenda today. I've got a few quick things before we get started. I'm going to go through some housekeeping items, a little bit about Conexxus. Todd's going to introduce our presenters. There's going to be the presentation, and then there will be a Q&A session afterward. So if you go to the next slide. So a little bit of housekeeping. So the replay of this webinar will be made available on Conexxus365.org, along with all of our previous webinars. You can send your questions directly through the Zoom interface, so please make sure you fill those out as soon as you think of something to ensure your question gets answered sooner. PCI credits are available for qualifying live events, so contact us if you're interested in that. Go to the next slide. So this is just a disclaimer that we have to include there that the views and opinions expressed in this webinar are of the presenters themselves and not Conexxus. Go to the next one. So thank you to our 2025 sponsors. A huge thank you and shout out to them. Without the extra support and work that they do, we wouldn't be able to do what we do on behalf of the industry. So it's really appreciated. All right, a little bit about Conexxus. So we are a nonprofit technology organization. Our members really do the heavy lifting. So we provide a neutral forum where retailers, vendors can network, come together to create standards and solutions that are beneficial to our industry. We educate through white papers and events like this one at Conexxus365. And we advocate on a technical level at other organizations to help steer the conversation around standards and policies so that changes don't affect your business. All right, so this is an educational webinar series for Conexxus365. Make sure you're subscribed to our email list and that you check our website to be notified of future webinars. The next one will be on recent data privacy legislation updates, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you follow us on LinkedIn and look for us on Conexxus.org. If you go to the next slide, now I'll turn it over to Todd to introduce our speaker.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Casey. So I do have the honor of introducing our speaker today. Sharon Skase is a payments advocate and is passionate about electronic payments with a career dedicated to enhancing payment systems and improving the customer experience. As a Conexxus Hall of Fame member, Sharon has been actively involved in the Conexxus environment since 2005 and has chaired the Retail Financial Transactions Committee since 2013. As a recognized standards champion, Sharon has supported payments projects since 1995, playing a key role in advancing industry specifications and best practices. Currently, Sharon is the manager of technical specification and merchant compliance at WEX, where she's been for the last 14 years. It's my pleasure to work today with Miss Sharon Skase.
Well, thank you, Casey and Todd. Hopefully I can live up to all of that. So I want to welcome everyone to the webinar for EBT Goes EMV, What's Happening and How to Get Ready. So basically preparing for what's coming up. So I usually start some of my meetings reminding people this is a good way to spend lunch. So I'm going to give you some pleasant pictures of chips while we get started with this. What we're going to talk about today is basically the who, what, when, where, why, and how we're moving forward with chip cards for EBT and how that's going to impact our industry. So while we won't be talking about these kinds of chips, instead we will be talking about these kinds of chips. So chips continue coming. We've been through the bank cards. We worked through US Common Debit. We're working through fleet cards, and now we have this new EBT card, and it's going to be moving to chip. So what does that really mean? So taking a step back, what is EBT? So this is an electronic system that allows government benefits. And this one is specifically for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs, or SNAP, formerly called food stamps, and the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF. The funds are federal, but the programs are administered at the state level. So we're going to talk about some of the things that are universal, it'll be same for everybody, and some things that you're going to depend on your state. to understand what's going to happen. So why are they moving to chip? It's the same reason everybody else is moving to chip. It's to reduce fraud, and specifically the skimming fraud that we're seeing. So we have two quotes here from last year on the impact that fraud has been having on our EBT programs. So the first one from Newsweek of 177,000 instances of fraud in the first quarter of 2024. And supplementally to that, the news program on WPSD shared that $5 million in fraud was spent on just the SNAP program and just in Illinois, Missouri, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So this is why we're moving to chip cards. So who's doing this and when are they going to be doing this? We're getting started. California, they've actually started issuing as of mid-January of this year. Oklahoma is aiming for the summer. And then Maryland has also made announcements. But before you breathe a sigh of relief because your state isn't mentioned or a state that you operate in isn't mentioned, benefits can be used in any state because they're federal benefits. And the expectation is that all bordering states, any state bordering one that's already issued an EBT chip card, is ready to accept that card for any cross-border transactions. So what does this look like? This is a map. We're going to refer to it a number of times as we talk through what are some of the resources, but this is actually from the USDA SNAP website of bordering states. So California is announced, which brings Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona into the mix. Oklahoma is coming up quickly. That's Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, New Mexico, and Texas. And then the latest to jump into this is Maryland, which brings in DC, Delaware, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia. So you can see how just a couple of states really expands who's looking into these programs already. So I have chip acceptance, so I'm good. And you probably already know the answer to this is no. We have some things that we need to do. Some differences about this chip card than other chip cards. So the first thing is this is a new AID. All of the states, they're going to use the exact same AID, the one that's shown there. Although there are different bins. So this AID will have multiple bins that it represents. And because the deployment is state dependent, you may start to see some of these cards before you're expecting it. So cards are expected to continue to have mag stripes while the chips are being released. And these cards will be contact only in some states or contact and contactless in other states. One of the things in our industry that we've typically done to protect ourselves is we've turned off accepting the mag stripe for many cards. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about. So we have a new AID. We need to include this. So you may be asking, do you just need to call your point of sale provider? This is a project from the ground up. So issuers have been working on this, started working on it last year. Most of them are almost finished from the last updates we have from them. So they developed to the specifications as those were coming out. They have test cards now and they have test environments. Your processor acquirer, those networks are still working on finishing up their updates. A couple of them are finished, but they're developing. They have specifications to share out to the point of sale providers. They have test cards and test environments. So then your equipment provider, your point of sale, your gateway, your EPS, they're developing the interface. They're doing their tests. They're working through certification. And then the merchant, you may choose to do some lab testing or a field test, and then you have deployment to go through. So there's a little bit of difference If you manage your own point of sale development and software, then all of this happens. Much of this is starting in the background or has started in the background with the branded providers and vendors working to have solutions to make this a smoother transition. So we can't flip our networks overnight. How are we going to be able to start accepting these cards to have the best experience for our customers that we can? So what about now? I've shared a lot of information very, very quickly. You might have the first thought of, no way, can't do it, way too much to happen, particularly since I'm near a state that's already issuing. So want to say it's not that bad. It's not a, I can't do it, or it's impossible. But we have to prepare for the F word. So, and the F word in our industry is fallback. That fallback to magstripe is the answer. As a, I'm going to say, temporary solution to get us from cards are being issued to all of our systems are updated and handling it appropriately. So point of sale vendors have been testing to be able to support the fallback in a specific case, which is empty candidate list. So to explain this a little bit better, when the chip and the terminal come in contact with each other, they negotiate to see what AIDs they both understand. So they may go, I understand the one AID that's on there and it processes beautifully. Maybe I understand more than one AID, so I'm going to ask, do you want to use this AID or do you want to use that AID to the consumer? Or it may be a decision of this AID is prioritized over that AID. In this case, the AID on the chip isn't known to the point of sale yet. Just it doesn't know how to process it. And so that's called empty candidate list. There's no match. In this case, we want the consumer to be able to swipe the card and read the magstripe and continue to get their benefits as they expect to. So, but one of the things we want to make sure that we don't do is all of a sudden open up this fallback to all of the cards. We've locked these down for very specific reasons. We want to keep it still as secure as possible, but have this opening up so that we can accept the cards as they continue to be rolled out. Some states will continue to accept manually keyed transactions, particularly during this transition. So you may have another alternative to purely fallback transactions. Okay, so what do you need to do? The first thing is to validate the point of sale solution supports an empty candidate list. I should take a step back. If your point of sale software is managed by a brand, company, or vendor, some of these steps will have already happened and you'll want to talk to them about it. If you're responsible for all of this, you may have to do some testing on your own. So we'll talk a little bit about both of those. So first, it's to validate that you can support this empty candidate list. To remediate, if you need to, so that you would be able to swipe the card or manually key enter it if it's allowed by your state. You want to ensure that fallback isn't opened up for other cards unintentionally. You want to confirm your processor requiring network point of sale providers support acceptance of this AID, and they can provide you with some test cards so that you can see how this is going to work. And you want to ask, this will be a touchy subject, you'll want to ask if this requires a larger investment because of other needs. We've been doing chip cards now for quite a while. We know that some installations are running into expired kernels that need to be replaced, which may require a full certification of your entire card suite. Is there other hardware that's reaching end of life that would need to be replaced? Is this kicking off a much bigger project than just the acceptance of this individual card? So it's to be aware of all of those other things that could be impacting what's going on. So a little bit of what's universal, we know today, versus what needs to be validated state by state where you do business. So there is one AID. everyone is going to support contact EMV. Today, all cards will be issued with a magstripe. So you'll have both. We expect that'll change in the future. PIN is required on all of these transactions. There's an expectation from the USDA that fallback to magstripe, empty candidate list fallback will be successful, which isn't true across the board right now. And zip code cannot be requested. Often the cards, they don't know where they've been shipped to, so that zip code registration doesn't work the same way as it does with a credit card. So some state-specific issues. The timing for issuance. When each state is going to do it, it's based on the state, tends to come up during budgeting time. The timing and process of how the magstripe cards will come out of the market. Is it going to be a mass? Today we turn them off? Probably not. Some have talked about rolling it out in a slow fashion. Some want to do a much quicker. So you know that now that there are no more magstripe cards, you don't have to worry about accepting those. The bin, each state is a different bin. If you do any looking up by bin, to be aware that there are a lot of them. States will make the decision if they're going to support a contactless or a tap implementation. And then manual key entry, as we've talked about, that's going to be based on your state's processing rules. So how is Conexxus helping? And Casey touched on some of this. First is education, things like this. We also have a monthly meeting where we talk about where things are and what can we do to help. There are 3 quick reference guides that are getting ready to be released, and I want to give a big thank you to all the merchants and suppliers that helped pull these together. I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these. The first is oil brands, retailer, headquarter, and wholesaler focused, and breaks down what do I need to do. So a little bit more detail than I've been providing in this. What does the technical team need to do? And then what will my customers experience? What are some of the expectations? It isn't a one size fits all. Each point of sale, each state could have a different experience. So we've tried to give a high level explanation of those. It's a 2-page document, so it's a quick read. Then the second one is geared towards site operators. This is I've gotten a letter from my state. What do I do? Since your answers may actually be coming from your brand and not necessarily be on you. And it describes a number of things that you need to do as a merchant. Some of those would have been covered by your brand. So we talk about that. The consumer shows up with an EBT card with a chip in it. What do I need to do? What are some of the processes that I need to look through? And then what can I tell the consumer? Aside from they never work, it's terrible, what are some constructive things that we can help the consumer with? And then the third document is basically, it's a frequently asked questions. So there's some background, some EBT chip card function information, and then the processing of that card. So the audience is anybody who needs or is interested in that level of information. Now, much of this information and a great resource is actually the SNAP website. So fns.usda.gov/snap/EBT/modernization is where much of this information comes from to tell you what you need to do. So on that page, which is on the right side of the screen, that's what the page will look like when you open it up. At the very bottom are technical resources. And I'm calling this out because these are some of the test cases that other documents will refer to. And that's where you can find them. It's where the map came from, is also on this page to watch what other states are doing as an announcement. So just as a quick recap of where we are right now, who does this impact? So anyone who accepts EBT cards today, including the processors, point of sale providers, and the merchants. What's happening? The EBT card is moving from a magstripe to a chip card. When will it happen? It's actually started, and each state will follow its own. Where? Every state's going to be going through this eventually. This is the goal, to release these cards. And the primary reason we're doing this is to prevent fraud. Now, I did see one question asking about HSA and FSA cards. The programs that allow multiple cards, multiple programs on a single card, we're taking more of a look into those. The general HSA and FSA cards are coming in the future. Some cards that act more like debit cards have actually already moved over, but they're running on a debit scheme, so you may not notice them as much. Those are the cash benefit type cards. So the answer will be a little bit mixed. So what does the future hold for those of us who remember our magic 8-ball? The basic answer is ask again later. While that's a tough answer to give you, they're going to continue coming. As mentioned in the beginning, we had bank cards. We went through US Common Debit. We're living through fleet cards. We're now doing EBT cards. Which card is going to be next? We know there will be more cards. Gift cards is probably the one that impacts us the most versus an over-the-counter card for medication. Your HSA spending account, yes, it's expected that those are going to go as well. So be on the lookout for what is next. What is it we can prepare for so that it's not as much of a rework, although we won't know AIDs and things like that. Okay, so this is time for the Q&A session.
Sharon, I think that last slide really hits home that this is an evolution. It's kind of that next step in the EMV cards. We've seen a lot of these coming up about, with the fleet cards being something that came after the bank cards. Now we're doing the EMV. Like you said, we've got gift cards and other things coming up. So a lot of this is work in progress. A lot of it's to be determined, but it's an evolution of the card environments that we live in today. So very good information. Thank you for that. Just to prove the curiosity of the topic, we had a question that came in very early, and I think you did speak about this, but maybe we can reiterate or expand on it a little bit. The question is, how can these function on a payment terminal when the processor specs have not been updated? And I think the question is really about if the functionality doesn't exist, and it really goes back to that fallback functionality. Can you expand on that just a little bit about how the processors are working on that and the implementation timeline again?
Mm-hmm. Happy to do that. And it is very much a work in progress. The specifications were very late coming out. There are 2 primary processors for particularly these programs, whether you're doing a SNAP or you're doing a TANF program that has that level of detail in it to limit you if it's going to be one that you can buy oranges, but you can't buy apples. Our industry hasn't usually done to that level of detail. But where we can supply the information and it's made at that level, yes, the specifications are getting updated, but it's very, very slow. So the time frame for accepting this, where they have broader application, is now if you're in California, but it continues to move forward as each state selects to do the program. The other challenge is that the test environments are set up to decline transactions today as opposed to approve them. And that's primarily for fraud prevention reasons at this point. So your testing is a little bit more in the negative side of things than into the positive. So there's more to come as that continues to develop.
Perfect, thank you. Just to reiterate again, the quick reference guides that you mentioned, they're very well put together documents. They've got a lot of information. Part of that is going to go into some of the question about what will stores do with these cards, how will clerks know what to do, and I think a lot of that information is spelled out to try to help them with that. Can you expand on what the expectation is for a store or a clerk when they receive one of these types of cards?
So ideally, the situation is it would process as it does today, and you wouldn't see any bump in the road. Because we know that the AID isn't there, the card will be used by the consumer, and they're most likely going to get a message that says that the chip is invalid, or the chip is not recognized, or invalid payment, which is a little bit confusing. Typically, it's set up that you need to do that 3 times to get things to move into a fallback situation, so that then the mag stripe can be read. We had a lot of conversations on, can we just skip the insert and go directly to the mag stripe? The card says it's a chip, so similar to a MasterCard or Visa today, if you accidentally swipe it first, it'll say you must use the chip reader. That will happen as well with these cards because they are marked as chip cards. So there's that extra step of get through the chip process to then use the magstripe process, or can you jump all the way to doing a manual key entry in your state? So a little bit of frustration there.
Yeah, and I think there will be some uniqueness by terminal type, by branded software. There's going to be some elements that are going to make it a little bit different by site, where, like you said, there may be some instances where the card has to be inserted first before it can be swiped. There may be other instances where it can be swiped as the initial default method of payment and continue to occur. So I think part of that's going to be an evolution of understanding the environment once the cards start hitting the stores. We did have another question that came in. They says, can you talk more about POS vendors, terminal vendor, and issuers' readiness in terms of timeline? Also, is there any timelines published by the USDA for merchants in terms of EBT chip card acceptance? So are there any deadlines or mandatory timelines?
So, I guess starting from the end, the timelines are based on the state. So California has already started to issue. Those cards are in market and acceptance is expected, although there are many merchants that are playing catch up in that space. The other states, there isn't a consolidated list of their dates, which is why you don't see one for Maryland yet. I haven't been able to find it actually published. I've only heard it talked about. So each state will make the announcement, and there isn't a central place that's been collecting that to give us more of a heads up. So that was the last question. The first question was about point of sale readiness. And I can't give specific dates because in our environment, it's going to depend on the combination of your processing network that you're using and your point of sale provider to be ready to go forward with this. So it's, for many, it's working with the brand to say, yes, they know that the software is ready and they can deploy it, or they know a fix is ready for fallback and that can be deployed while waiting for the final solution. So all of that's really going to depend on the environment that you're in. And Todd, you might have a little bit more information on some specifics.
Yeah, and it probably also depends on the optics that everybody's viewing it in and the type of category that their stores. There was another question that came in about, is there a list of POS systems that are able to accept EBT with EMV enabled? And I think it kind of lends to this same question, that it's going to be dependent on your store type, your vendor type, and who your processor is and where they are in those steps. I think that the current expectation is that a lot of sites are not going to initially have EMV EBT capability, and that's where the fallback is going to become very important. There was a question that asked, as long as fallback is there,
Did Todd freeze up or is it me?
I think it was Todd. So I'll finish asking the question. So they were asking, as long as fallback is there, are states like California and Oklahoma okay?
So, yes, fallback is acceptable. The situation you need to make sure is that your point of sale supports it and that your processing network supports it. There are specific bits that need to be set on the transaction that basically say I was in fallback. And so it needs to trace all the way back through the system. So it's just something that you'll want to make sure is tested.
Sharon, I apologize. Can you hear me again? I
Yes, we can.
for a moment. I'm not sure if I missed a whole lot, but
So Casey finished the question for you.
perfect.
And that was all we got to, so you're good.
And I didn't know if you wanted to add anything from your experience with fallback yet.
So our experience with fallback, we have identified that the terminal software does respond differently by vendor type. So there's functionality, the way that the cards are handled, whether it be the prompting or the actual acceptance of a card in fallback is different by vendor type. And so there's going to be some differences in there, but we are currently working through each of those, and I'm sure that everyone is kind of doing the same thing. There's a question that came in, and I don't think we talked about this, but is there any type of liability shift timeline that has been published for these cards in response to the fraud?
So unlike bank cards, there isn't a liability shift that's been announced for making this change. It's simply a change to improve security on the card. So I've not seen any state issue a liability relief on this. Have you, Todd?
I have not either. There's a question that came in that kind of supports the same question. Will supporting just the fallback processing for these alleviate fraud in any way? And I think the answer is the same. We haven't seen any type of liability shift for fraud, so the expectation is that fraud will be handled in the same way that it is today. There's a question about, does EBT chip support pin bypass?
So the answer to that is no. Pin bypass is not supported with EBT. It's a required value.
I do think I lost a couple of questions in the reconnect disconnect, but there's another one that asks, which is more in the terminal processing, but is there a kernel scheme that EBT would use in particular for this?
Very good question. The background of the chip is very much based on the MasterCard kernel. So it's focused on the MasterCard kernel today. And that's true across the board.
Okay.
So I'll jump in on a few questions that may have gotten lost for Todd.
Thank you.
No problem. So someone asked if EMV EBT chip cards are ready for testing.
There are processing networks that have test cards, so you have to work with your processor to ensure that you have test cards. I think I saw a follow-up question asking specifically about the generic ones. I would need to double check and see if those are available. They weren't the last time I asked, but that was probably 2 months ago. So I would need to follow up on that one.
I did have one, Casey, that I was able to capture before. And it's a question about, will existing magstripe cards stop working after the new EMV cards have been issued to the consumer?
So I'm going to sound like a broken record. That is a state decision on when the magstripe cards are going to stop working. We've heard both of they're going to exist in parallel for a while. There are other ones that say minute that the chip card's been used, then the magstripe card will no longer work, to ensure that we don't have both of them running around. So it depends on the state and how they've decided to disable the magstripe. The magstripe only cards. The magstripe on the chip card will work, but the magstripe only cards could become non-functional once the chip card is used.
Yeah, and I think we've heard some states say that they'll continue to be active for a period of time, but the expectation is that even if the new cards are issued with the chip card, the magstripe on those will continue to work indefinitely. So it's if they have an old card that they've been issued a new card, there is a chance that those old cards will stop working because they've been issued a new card, which is standard practice for all card types, whether it be bank cards and other things. But the expectation is that the magstripe functionality will continue to work. There is a question about future requirement, whether or not once chip card capability has been introduced into the terminal in the PinPad environment, will there be a requirement that the magstripe functionality no longer be available? And I think that would be similar to how we've done with bank cards, that there's still fallback capability. It'll be determined by the host and the processor, and whoever the provider is, whether or not they want to continue to allow fallback transactions. And part of that will depend on future regulations when it comes to fraud liability and what the rules on that will be eventually. Let's see. We had one that came in, and I know it may be very specific, but it says they've started to enable fallback across their sites. However, they've noticed that transactions being sent to the acquirer are coming back with a response code of insufficient funds. Is this anything that we have heard about or we've heard of others experiencing, specifically in the California environment?
Oh, that's interesting, because that's what test cards also come back with, insufficient funds. There are valid reasons to get an insufficient funds response back. I haven't heard of it happening more than usual. I know, Todd, you're a little bit closer on the processing side of that.
Yeah, I have not heard of that specifically. I know that we have sites in California, and I think that we've started seeing some of these cards, but I haven't seen this instance come back.
Okay. We can do some more asking and seeing if other people are reporting that same issue.
A question came up about how to account for and differentiate EBT snap versus EBT cash when it comes to the chip. Will there still be prompting available to the consumer to select the specific transaction type? Do you know, Sharon, if that's part of the specifications?
I don't know that I've seen it in the specifications. I'll do some more digging.
I would say I think the expected functionality would be that whatever capabilities exist today would be expected to be available from the POS providers going forward. And if there's those capabilities, they would do the same thing, but we can confirm. And I think that everybody that manages their own POS should also confirm with their vendor that that functionality would be prompting available, or some sort of differentiation and process that they would have available to them. Here's one I'll read. I won't try to interpret because I'm not sure that I understand what it says exactly, but it says, do we have EMV specs kernel books available for CT and CTLS processing for the new AID, or should it follow MasterCard specs?
So, and I believe CT here is standing for contact and CTLS is contactless.
Good interpretation.
Just to make sure that I did get the question right. So there are most of the test cases that you'll find on the USDA website specific to this have to do with fallback. So for the most part, yes, they are following the MasterCard specifications. I'm not aware of any differences there.
Yeah, I think that's the expectation just with the new AID, right? But using the same specifications.
Mm-hmm. So at least we don't have to roll out another kernel as long as you're MasterCard accepting.
Yes. I don't have a question related to this, but I wanted to reiterate one of the statements that you made on one of the slides talked about larger investment being keyed on. Really, it's about there may be other things that are required for your site in order to go to this capability because that version may include other enhancements. So as we all move forward, software that includes the capability to accept EBT as an EMV card may come with functionality that enables a new fleet card or other functionality, and it may mean that you've increased your base of software and you need to make some potential other upgrades to the site. So something to be aware of, that it may be tied to other functionality, other investment to support that. So it's not something that may be able to just be dropped in. So you'll want to consider that as you move forward with your kind of your upgrade path for this. Casey and Sharon, I don't currently have any other questions that have not been addressed online that I see.
I am seeing the same.
So Sharon, I greatly appreciate you spending the time with us today. Your knowledge is surpassing of everything that I would expect. It's definitely a pleasure to work with you. But Casey, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I think that we're to the end.
All righty. So if you guys have any more questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach us at info@conexxus.org or cbrand@conexxus.org if you have ideas for future webinars, questions on this one. Again, this will be made available on demand. Give us a couple days to edit it, upload it, but it will be out there. So thank you for joining, and make sure to keep on the lookout for announcement for the one next month on data privacy regulations. And thank you, Sharon and Todd, for joining us.
Thanks, Casey and
Thank
Todd.
you. Thank you all.